It is mock draft season, and we are back with another Superflex Tight End Premium Dynasty Rookie Draft. This one with a twist. We're throwing in real life draft capital, real life landing spots from a 7-round mock draft. That is right, it is a 7-round real mock draft that we're going to turn into a couple of round rookie dynasty draft. I'm joined by the fantastic guys from TH Fantasy Football Podcast, Pestle and Ed. Pestle, how are you doing this evening?
All good, thank you, Rich. Yeah, really excited to be on. I think this is one for our podcast bucket list, joining you in the Fantasy Sanctuary. So yeah, really excited to get stuck into draft, especially with those projected real elements of draft capital.
Yeah, no, it's we'll blame Tom for throwing out the idea. It's something we try and do every year. And Ed, does it change much in terms of, I guess, how you're approaching this rookie draft? Now we've thrown in some real draft capital, some real landing spots, or are you still just, I guess, evaluating the player on a player-by-player basis and not taking too much into account of the draft capital and landing spot?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, some of the landing spots are very interesting. But with free agency kicking off, it's landing spots change by the second. So yeah, we're very much kind of depending on what's happening at the moment rather than what might happen in the future. So yeah, it adds a bit of spice to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that time of year where you can have a take, you can create a video, put it out, and within 30 seconds it's so we're just going to roll with it. We are using, for people following along, we're using the 7-round mock draft from Pro Football Network. I believe Ian Cummings did it. It's about a week old, but we're going to roll with it. Pestle, you won the pre-show coin toss and have been appointed the 101. We're going to roll through it. We're going to let Ed go with the 102, and I'll follow up with the 103. But Pestle, is it locked in, sensible, no questions asked here at 101, or is there any sort of debate in your mind?
No, not at all. Very straightforward. And with the draft capital projected here as well, it makes it really exciting. So no surprise, Ashton Jeanty at running back. Going to the Bears in this mock as well, which I think is a really nice pick. We expected him to get that good draft capital, obviously. And the things that stood out for me when you're watching him is, I think it's been transferred to NFL, is just how he deals with contact. He just seems, he's a bit like a Dodgem. Or a bumper car, where he just seems to bounce into play and then he's off straight away again. That's my comp for Ashton Jeanty. It's a fairground ride. And then also his stiff arm efficiency, if that transfers to the NFL as well, especially for such a shorter running back, it's just a human highlight reel. You'd expect in Chicago as well that he would take over that backfield immediately. Swift and Johnson, they seem to keep having the opportunity to really get it going last year. And I think especially when we saw the Bears at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, you just saw there was so much potential for a solid running back to come in there. And Jeanty coming in there, he really could get firing straight away. And that fantasy relevance is surely going to hit week 1. Who knows?
Yeah, it's pretty special, isn't it? When you think exciting new offensive play caller in Ben Johnson, they've traded for Joe Tooney and Jonah Jackson, and then you're adding in Drew Dorman in free agency. Like, that's a lot of investment on the interior offensive line. So then go and spend a top 10 pick on a running back, they're certainly going to feed him the ball. Ed, you're up next with the 102. Do you feel like it's a big drop off after Jeanty, or is there someone here that you'd consider throwing in that same tier?
No, I think there is a bit of a drop-off after Jeanty, or so it looks like. But I think it's quite a strong running back class compared to last year. So I'd be tempted to go running back here again. And I think it's the landing spot that moves this player up the rankings a little bit, and that's Omarion Hampton, the running back. And the landing spot on the mock draft has got him landing at the Raiders, which would be great for him, as the backfield was uninspiring to say the least there. And obviously with Gino there now, that makes them kind of more relevant as well. He had a solid combine, and he's got a chance of being a pretty relentless running back who sees a lot of the field if he did end up at the Raiders. A bit like Jeanty, can kind of pinball off defenders. to find those extra yards, but he's also got that ability to find open space and make defenders miss. But yeah, it's been interesting watching some of the videos of him ploughing through contact.
Yeah, very exciting back. Little bit surprising in this mock, he does fall to that sort of middle of the second round here with the Raiders with the 47th overall pick. Any concern if he does fall that far about the draft capital invested, or do you think this landing spot on the player is just too good to give up?
Yeah, he's an impressive looking back, and I think I'd be surprised, like you say, I'd be surprised if he did drop that far. And I think quite often what will happen is that there'll be a run of them at some point, won't there? And it just depends when someone pulls that trigger and that happens. But no, I wouldn't have any concerns. I think regardless of where he ends up, I think he'll do you a solid job.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fascinated with this draft because of the depth of that kind of second tier of running back. I think you could probably name 5 or 6 guys that could be the second back picked after Jeanty. I don't know if they're all going to fall slightly because there's so many of them, or whether they're all so talented that they're going to get pushed up and maybe we see another couple sneak into the back end of the first round. That, if I could wave a magic wand and see into the future and answer that question, that's definitely the one that I would do. I'm up here at the 103. I'm going to go a little bit different to what I would normally. Normally here, based on my pre-draft ranks, I'd be going Tet McMillan, but I didn't like the landing spot. 9 to the Saints. I think there's quarterback questions. I think Derek Carr's quarterback for 2025, but I don't know who the quarterback is for 2026. Competing for targets with Chris Olave. So I'm going to go with the quarterback, Cam Ward, who in this mock, the Giants traded up to the 101 to go and acquire. I think he's a bit of a project. I think there's some exciting arm talent there, but anytime you can combine him with Malik Neighbors, I think it's going to be an exciting offense, and it's worth the high upside risk here at the 103. We're coming back to you now then, Pestle, with the 4th overall pick. Where are you going to take us?
I'm going to go for a player that I absolutely love and possibly a little bit higher than several on. I love the landing spot for this player from a fantasy point of view. I don't love the landing spot from a point of view that I'd have to then root for him if I picked my team. Mm-hmm. That's Treveyon Henderson, who is slated to go to the Chiefs. So I just absolutely love watching him. 7.1 yards per carry in 2024. Slight question marks over him being a little bit light, but we hear those this time of year, and then it's not an issue by the time we get into the season. I think I'm really torn between Hampton and Henderson. I think I would put Hampton ahead, but I'm glad Ed's taken that decision away from me. I just think he's going to get a bit more of a scattering of those big plays throughout the season. He just seems to have a nose for finding that space. He should walk into that RB1 position, really. Hunt, Pacheco, now Eli Mitchell. Are we really that concerned that they would challenge him too much in that backfield? They'd obviously get snaps, but I think it's his to take. I'd be really disappointed if he ends up in Kansas, as I've already said, because he looks like he could be such a prolific running back, and I don't want to see that in Kansas.
Yeah, I think it's the receiving game work as well, isn't it? Which would be incredibly enticing in that offense. Before we get on to Ed's pick, though, if you are finding us for the first time, welcome into the sanctuary. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We have got all the rookie content you will need to crush your rookie drafts. It's all locked and loaded, and it's going to be coming out to you very, very soon. Right, Ed, we've had 4 picks. No wide receivers picked so far. Are you gonna buck the trend and finally get a receiver off the board?
It's difficult to not turn to Tet McMillan now. After last year's wide receiver class, clearly this year's class isn't quite in the same stratosphere. There's no Malik Neighbors or an HJ this year, but Tet McMillan looks to be the best wide receiver in the draft. Apart from he who shall not be named, kind of like Voldemort, isn't he? We'll talk about him at some point, I'm sure. The wide receiver cornerback hybrid, but Tet McMillan, he'll be playing 100% wide receiver snaps, which is positive. Measurables are good, production was solid, and he's undoubtedly going to be a kind of top pick in the draft. The landing spot, I think, as you alluded to in your New Orleans, could be an issue. But if he did end up there, can we rule out he won't leapfrog Olave? I mean, Olave has been underwhelming and let a lot of people down over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think the question with Olave is health, isn't it? Obviously, he's had the concussion issues. I guess maybe if you'd argue the Saints are spending a top 10 pick on a wide receiver, maybe they know a little bit more than we would in this scenario about the longevity of Chris Olave in the NFL. I'm going to come along to the 106, and I'll be honest, I'm really struggling with this pick based on these landing spots and draft capitals. I don't love any of the wide receivers. We've got Luther Burden falling into the second round along with Emeka Egbuka. I feel like given it Superflex, I've kind of got to go with the quarterback. I've got serious question marks about Shedeur Sanders as a prospect, but the 102 in Cleveland, it feels like anytime a quarterback is being drafted that high, you're getting at least 3 years out of him as a fantasy asset. So I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders at the 106 and hand it back over to you, Pestle, to kick us off into the second half of the first round.
Well, I'm going to continue with my third pick at running back, and it's a player that I think the more I've seen over the last few weeks, I've kind of enjoyed more and more and more, and the landing spot could be really tasty as well, and that's Quinshon Judkins, who's slated to go to the Broncos in this mock. Clearly a 3-down back and also give you solid goal line production, and he could end up actually being better value than Hampton Henderson, I think, with those touchdowns. The Broncos in this draft, this mock draft, are down to have a great draft, as we'll talk about with another tight end pick later on. But after another underwhelming season for Williams, Judkins should represent a solid upgrade, and I think could have a really, really solid role there and add another weapon for Bo Nix as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think, as you said, that Sean Payton offense is potentially explosive. I'd be really fascinated to understand if he does go to Denver, what the approach to the wide receiver usage is going to be. The receiving game usage is going to be, because if he can be that movable piece, we've seen Judkins not be a prolific receiver in college. I think that could really elevate him to, superstar level if they're going to keep him as a complement, as, whether it be sort of a 1A, 1B situation with some other pass catching back. It could potentially cap his ceiling, but it's very exciting nonetheless. Ed, you have got the 8th pick. Where are we going to go here?
Well, I think I'm ready to make my Brock Bauer / Sam Laporta pick. So I think it's time for a tight end. And there's a decent lot of tight ends in this draft. I mean, Tyler Warren goes higher in the draft, but I think I'd go for Colston Loveland here. Again, landing spot at the Broncos is quite appealing. I think he's recovering from shoulder injury, so he didn't play at the combine, but I still think he'll be a round 1 pick in the real draft. Good fantasy outlook. He produced, despite poor quarterback play at Michigan, and managed 14.4 yards per catch. I mean, obviously, we've seen Laporta and Bowers do it the last 2 seasons. Not saying he's going to get those sort of numbers, but he's potentially one of the rookie tight ends that could do it in 2025. And Bo Nix, if he ended up in Denver, would get a great weapon. And I'd happily take him as the tight end 1 in rookie drafts if this played out. But Evan Engram is reportedly visiting Denver today, though, so that could throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah, I guess this is, back-to-back Broncos picks here. Potentially Sean Payton getting his joker if we're going to put him in that role. Could absolutely see Colston Loveland as that kind of movable piece. I'm going to follow it up. I'm going to go back to the wide receiver world. Now, this is a guy that I feel this is expensive. I would be shocked if I'm drafting him here in rookie drafts, but given the draft capital in this mock draft, and some of the reports that are coming out at the moment, it feels wild. But I'm going to go with Matthew Golden here, who in this mock draft went 12th overall to the Cowboys. I think it's a really interesting fit alongside CeeDee Lamb. I think he could be the explosive element that this offense is looking for. And yeah, just really excited to potentially see him there. I'd just be gobsmacked if we do end up seeing him as a top 12 pick. Pestle, are you a believer in Matthew Golden, or do you feel like this is probably the peak of his hype and we're going to start to see him drop down as people plug back on the tape?
I think everyone always double, triple counts the 40 time when it comes to the combine, because it's the showpiece of the combine, isn't it? But he seems solid downfield against physical coverage, managed to routine. His high point of the ball is really quite impressive at times as well. And I think we have to always remind ourselves, when you're watching college tape, you're watching these wide receivers against college cornerbacks, many of whom will not make it to the NFL. But he just seems to have a huge amount of what he does. I think my one kind of worry is that when you're looking at how much CD Lamb is clearly going to still want to dominate targets, that's going to be there for a fancy consideration. But surely he's clear wide receiver 2 alongside Tolbert, Turpin, Cooks. Surely their target share is going to get dramatically reduced if he ends up there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And you are now back on the clock with the 10th overall selection.
I'm torn between a couple of wide receivers and a running back here. I've gone running back 3 in a row, so I need to change that for a bit of variation though. And I'm going to go for, well, I've got to go for someone who's going to be second in their targets out my 2 options, but I'm going to plump for Luther Burden III, who is drafted to go to the Giants here. Still currently clear wide receiver 2 in rookie draft, I think personally. I think he just sits above Golden for me. Disappointed 2004, but after such a good 2023, I think we can probably forgive that. He's got such a stocky build, means he frequently gets through those tackles with his contact balance. One concern is the drops, and I think that can't be too heavily focused on, but it also can't be completely ignored. I think alongside Neighbours, it might be a tough spot for elite production, but he could assert himself as that clear wide receiver too. And say with a rookie QB in the mix as well, he was probably more one that you're thinking a year or 2 ahead, but we also can't rule out that production year one, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a little bit mad, isn't it, this landing spot? Because you think Luther Burden's probably, his peak outcome, his dream scenario is Malik Neighbours as a rookie, and we now find him on the same team, drafted by the Giants in this situation, which would, it'd be very interesting to see them both on the same offense. Ed, we're coming back around to you with your final pick in the first round.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with receiver now. The landing spot, I'm not massively keen on with this player, but I think the talent's there, and that's Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver who's slated to land at the Bears. Great slot receiver, and he's got that Ohio State pedigree. He's their all-time receptions leader, and he's clearly NFL ready, so potentially a really safe floor. 10 touchdowns from 74 receptions, shows his value in the red zone. And he always seems to find the ball. Despite taking 75% of snaps from slot, he could still be a solid fantasy prospect. As I said, Chicago is a concern. Got the kind of Roman Dunze got a little bit lost there last year, didn't he? And there'd be a hell of a lot of competition if he ended up there. But yeah, still a talented receiver.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Where we're sort of balancing good landing spot versus competition for talent. And I think this is one of my biggest frustrations with people when we talk about landing spot is I think sometimes being part of a good offense is a good thing, but also volume of targets is a good thing. And it's like, I would really like his NFL fit as the slot receiver in this offense. I think Odunze, DJ Moore as those prototypical outside receivers, Egbuka being able to be that slot heavy guy. I think the Bears are going to run a lot of 11 and 12 personnel. So I'd be excited about that. But it's like, as you said, we're probably capping his ceiling as like 80 targets as a rookie. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily lead to elite fancy production, does he? So it's a tough one, but the talent's absolutely there. And I think he'd certainly end up being Caleb Williams' best friend moving forward. So I'm now back on the clock, and it definitely feels like there's been a bit of a tier break here. There's a few guys I still like that are floating around, but given the tight end premium nature, given the fact that this player went in the top 10, I feel like I don't love the prospects. I think he's got some definite flaws in his analytical profile. But Tyler Warren went 7th overall to my Jets. Getting him at the 112 in the Tight End Premium League feels like really good value. So yeah, kind of have to round out the first round with some more tight end love. Pestle, you're going to kick us off at the beginning of the second round. Sorry. Would you have scooped up Tyler Warren if he was still sat on the board at 201?
I think Tyler Warren, he's been in the mix there. I think I probably wouldn't have gone for him at that point because, as kind of you said, as a raw prospect, there's those question marks after just that one solid year of production. I think Justin Fields, it probably helps him. I think he might help Justin Fields as well. So yeah, that could be a really interesting landing spot if that were to come through. Where I'm going to go though is we've heard about the successor to Ezekiel Elliott constant over the last few years. The fact that Zeke managed to be his own successor last season. So I'm going with the running back slated to land at the Cowboys in this mock, which is Kaleb Johnson. Underwhelming combine, hugely productive in college. In 12 games last year, 1,500 yards rushing, 21 touchdowns, and a little bit of passing work too. I think the Cowboys will finally get their guy. Johnson gets the workload, and that should make him fantasy relevant fairly early on into his NFL career as well.
No, I think it's a dream landing spot, isn't it? I think whichever running back ends up being drafted by the Cowboys in the NFL draft, I think is going to see themselves boosted up at least probably a half round, if not a full round, in rookie drafts. Now, Ed, you are back on the clock here. Your first pick in the second round. Where are we heading off to?
I'm tempted by quarterback mainly because of the landing spot. In fact, yeah, I was thinking running back, but I'm going to go quarterback. It's Superflex after all, and it's because of the landing spot, because it's Jaxson Dart who's predicted to land at the Titans. I mean, how long until he takes over from Levis and Rudolph? I'd say one game. I mean, there's question marks over if he can translate his game to the NFL, especially with 53% of his dropbacks being play action. The NFL average was 26% last year. And he was so used to wide open receivers that he just won't get in Tennessee. He's a mixed bag, but with early round 2 draft capital and a route to being a starter, I don't really think I can pass him up at this stage of a Superflex draft.
Yeah, I'd honestly, I think I'd laugh out loud if this landing spot genuinely happened in the NFL draft. You got the Titans who drafted Will Levis 2 years ago with an early second round pick, who is a quarterback that has lots of talent but makes insane mental mistakes, and Jaxson Dart, who is, slightly different type of quarterback, but a very talented quarterback who makes the most insane, consistent mental mistakes time and time again. So, yeah, there would be some significant symmetry there if he did. But look, I always say second round picks, that's where you shoot for upside in rookie drafts, and there are a few players that have probably got the upside of a Jaxson Dart. Now I'm stuck here staring at the board. To those who are following along, we've still got one quarterback who was drafted in the second round in Jalen Milroe. There's one running back, Cam Skattebo, who went to the Browns, who was drafted in the third round. And then it's basically a whole load of wide receivers who are drafted in the back end of the second and the early third. I'm going to dive in to the wide receiver pool. I'm going to go with Elic Ayomanor. Now, I don't think this landing spot will necessarily happen after the DK Metcalf trade, because getting 3 big-bodied outside wide receivers who all thrive in the exact same area of the field might not particularly work. But I think Ayomanor is a really interesting prospect. I think good route runner for his size. I think he's good at the catch point. And yeah, if he landed in Pittsburgh, maybe this means that George Pickens has moved on elsewhere, and I would be very interested in that landing spot. Coming back to you though, Pestle, where are we going to head off to now?
I'm going for a player you've just mentioned. I'm going back to running back. Seems that I've been very running back heavy throughout this whole mock. Surely if this was from actual dynasty lineup, one of them would hit. I'm going for Cam Skattebo, who is drafted to go to the Browns. I mean, firstly, a great name, and in more casual dynasty leagues, I think he's probably going to go up a pick or two higher just based off that. 969 yards after contact in 2024 piqued my interest, and then that's consolidated with 605 receiving yards. In one article I was reading earlier on today, he was described as a terror on the goal line because he's such a powerful runner, and that's something that's certainly in his repertoire. Landed at the Browns, Chubb's definitely in the twilight of his career after another unfortunate injury. Jerome Ford, I feel like I've said for the last 3 years, this is the Jerome Ford year. We've still not quite seen that. So if he were drafted at this point by the Browns, it's because the Browns have got an eye on him being their new running back one, surely. And he's a player that could convert that into solid fantasy value.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting prospect who, as you said, has the potential to compete as a rookie, particularly if he does end up in a situation like Cleveland. Ed, we're starting to get a little bit thinner on the ground. Is there anyone that's jumping out for you here?
I think it's time. It's time to pull the trigger on Travis Hunter. We've talked to you. Well, you mentioned round 2 is the place where you go for upside, and I hope he's got a lot of upside. In the draft, he went at the 103, and he went to the Titans. We just don't know, do we? At this point, you're getting the wide receiver 1 in the draft based on talent. And the chance at a player who will play wide receiver. It's not ideal, but it seems like the sort of place where you'd throw a dart on him. Adding the fact Brian Callahan said at the combine that he sees him playing both wide receiver and cornerback, that isn't really convincing from a fantasy point of view. But I think he's worth a punt at this stage.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great pick. I think, I've been on record saying if you guaranteed to me that Travis Hunter was 100% snap share guy on offense as a rookie, he'd be my rookie 101. I think this is a guy who's looked like a difference maker, a phenomenal wide receiver prospect. And if recent reports are led to believe, never practiced with the offense, never sat in offensive meeting rooms, didn't really know the playbook, was just told what route to run, ran it, and was still the best player on the field. So imagine how good he could be if he was actually understanding what he was supposed to be doing on the field at all times. So yeah, I'm really excited about Travis Hunter. As you said, I think this is the point where you can absolutely shoot for upside and take that risk. I just pray for all things that are fancy that we do end up seeing him as a 100% snap share wide receiver that can play occasional snaps over on defense, but please just give us to him as a true offensive weapon, because I think he could be
preferably
phenomenal.
not at the Titans.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Particularly if they're going to have Jaxson Dart as their starting quarterback.
Yes.
Forward. So I'm now back up on the clock. Now, this is where I think landing spot draft capital is really interesting in these drafts, because there is a big pool of wide receivers. I don't like any of the landing spots for them. The guys that I'm much higher on, someone like Jaylen Royals, he fell significantly in this mock draft. So I'm looking there, scratching around, and it comes to a point where I'm like, there's a running back that I really like as a deep sleeper, but he got 4th round draft capital and ended up with the Chargers. And I feel like, do you know what? That could be a really, really interesting landing spot for a really interesting player. And that is DJ Giddens, who, if he comes in and is, a 60% opportunity share for the Chargers, I think he's got league winning potential, because I think he's going to slip down rookie draft boards, and I'm very, very intrigued by the prospect. So maybe a bit of a reach, but as I said, shoot for upside in the second. I'm going for Giddens here. Pestle, where are you going to? I'm stealing all your running backs. There's not many left, so I feel like you might have to.
I know, I'm going to have to go wide receiver again. Giddens was a little bit further down on my list, but for the exact reasons that you'd said there. But I'm going to go here for a player I'd probably wouldn't have minded taking at the same point I went for Skattebo, and that is Tre Harris, wide receiver, marked down on this mock to end up at the Chiefs. So he had the best yards per route run of this class in 2024, 5.12. Great boundary receiver, always seems to fight off contact. Not great at breaking tackles once he actually has the ball. With so many injuries over the last 2 years, though, that will be behind him in the NFL. He just seemed to often be in and out of the game quite a lot last year. Key problem, if he's slated to go to the Chiefs, we know that next off season he'll be arrested for something, but we'll have a fancy before then. I just think he could be a good compliment to Worthy, and surely at this time of asking, we find an elite fantasy receiver is that tandem of Patrick Mahomes. It seems like we should have one. Is this going to be the player that gives us that fantasy?
Yeah, it feels like this would be almost a perfect complement to the receiving room in Kansas City, wouldn't it? You got Tre Harris as that prototypical X. You got Xavier Worthy as the Z movable piece. You've got Rashee Rife as the kind of power slot underneath guy. And then you got Hollywood Brown, who's having to fill in for whichever of the three has been arrested that week and therefore can't get on the field. But yeah, I'd be really interested by the landing spot. I like the prospect. Yeah, it could certainly be an interesting one. Coming back over to you now, Ed, we are motoring our way through the second round. If you're starting to get to a point and you are looking at the draft board, not necessarily knowing who these players are, intrigued to find out a little bit more, you can hit the join button down below. Every year we put out a rookie guide. Last year we had over 120 prospects. This year we're looking at well over 80. It has written profiles on every single player, all of my rookie model data, and everything more, including rankings. All you got to do is hit the silver or gold tier down below and you get a free copy of that. Ed, 208, where are we going?
I think I'm going to stick with running back, to be honest. As I said earlier, I think it's quite a strong class. And after Jeanty, I think they're kind of quite bunched. There's a decent second tier there. And I'd probably count Ollie Gordon in that tier. He's projected to land at the Steelers in this draft. And I mean, obviously they've got running back options there with Najee and Jaylen Warren. He'd probably be entering a running back stable. He had a quite underwhelming 2024. But it's got quite an intriguing landing spot. It's got a big frame, and once he breaks into space, he kind of reaps the rewards on the outside. As I said, are Harris and Warren the future of the backfield in Pittsburgh? Possibly not. Will they both be there in 2025? Who knows? And if Gordon did end up in Pittsburgh, potentially he could be the future there.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, isn't it? You think Warren, they've extended the restricted free agent tender on him. Looks like he's probably going to be an option there. Maybe it's Gordon sits for 2025 behind Warren, but then takes over the backfield in 2026. So maybe a pick that you have to be a little bit more patient on, but there's certainly plenty of upside there. I am going to dive into the wide receiver pool again. I'm going to go with Jayden Higgins, who in this mock went the 57th overall pick to the Panthers. Loved the player, absolutely loved the landing spot. I think he walks in. This wouldn't be particularly amazing for all of my Jalen Coker hype and hope, but I think he'd be a great fit for Bryce Young. I think the kind of natural route running movement skills would blend well with Bryce Young, and I think that level of accuracy could be fantastic. So yeah, excited about Jayden Higgins here at the back of the second. Pestle, we're swinging back around to you with your final pick before we ask for some sleepers after this round. But yeah, your final pick, finish up with a good one.
So I'm tempted to go for the one remaining quarterback option here, but based on draft capital and that team already picking up another quarterback, I'm going to stick with the Jayden Higgins team. I'm going to go for Jaylin Noel, wide receiver, going down to the Seahawks here. Even alongside Jayden Higgins, he surpassed 1,000 yards an hour. He was top 6 in every event at the combine, including winning the bench press amongst all wide receivers with 23 reps, and that is something that I think has got to transfer into something. Will it be wide receiver production? Who knows, but he needs some bounce for that. He's small, but he's explosive. And yes, he has JSN to compete with. But with Darnold now on his way to Seattle, I think he takes a big step up here in his value if he got drafted into that setup.
Yeah, it's a fantastic landing spot. As you said, DK Metcalf gone, Tyler Lockett gone. Feels like he could be a nice complement alongside JSN and reinvested at the quarterback position. Should hopefully be an interesting offense. Ed, your final pick. Feel free to talk through the board. Anybody that particularly jumps out? Any tough decisions, or is it straightforward for you right now?
Well, we've mentioned Jalen Milroe a couple of times, but the landing spot of the Raiders does put you off. There's Montrell Johnson, running back. There are a few wide receivers there as well, and we could go into the tight end room as well. We've got Harold Fanning on our list, but I think I'm probably going to play it safe with the receiver and go for Tez Johnson, who's projected to land at Jacksonville. He's put up back-to-back 80-plus reception seasons, quite a twitchy wide receiver and great ability to change direction. Could see immediate value alongside Brian Thomas, who will draw the focus of the coverage, especially given his yards after catch ability. Most of Tez Johnson's work will be on the underneath game, which will kind of diversify the Jags passing game nicely, especially if Evan Engram does move on as what looks likely. I mean, Jags wide receiver 2 spot isn't a spot you'd usually want to target, but that could change with Tez Johnson.
Yeah, I guess you're hopeful that this offense takes a step forward. Trevor Lawrence finally becomes the second coming. Liam Cohen takes the offense forward potentially, and I think it's a nice compliment, isn't it? As you said, Brian Thomas, the recently acquired Damian Brown, kind of stretching the field, pushing defenses deep, and allowing Tez Johnson and his very, 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 very small frame to operate underneath. So I am now back up with my final pick. As you said, I'm tempted by Jalen Milroe. I think I talked about in our QB positional preview, which will be dropping very soon on this channel. I believe Jalen Milroe is the only player in this entire draft class who has got 101 overall startup potential. I think he has got the potential to be the first overall pick in a startup. I don't see anyone else on this board or in this class who has that potential. The problem is that the range of outcomes is so wide. That's minuscule percentile. And I think the more likely scenario is that he is never a fantasy relevant player. I am going to stick with the tight end room though. Mason Tyler, he's a guy that I'm intrigued by. I don't love, but good second round draft capital and the landing spot with the Chargers. I think that is very, very intriguing. So I'm very happy to take a swing with the final pick in the second round here, given the tight end premium. So Pestle, I will come to you first. Any players left on the board? I know we talked about Jalen Milroe, so probably skip over him. But any players left on the board that you're surprised to see not drafted as we've gone through 24 picks?
Not necessarily surprised because he was towards the bottom of my my 24. But that's Harold Fanning, tight end, who's down to go to the Saints here. The most productive college tight end in 2024, but it seems like that athleticism. I mean, the small school needs to come into it. Bowling Green State, anybody? Also, small light to most tight ends, but I still think it's maybe worth a gamble. I think the thing that appeals to me is that landing spot at the Saints. Does Derek Carr like to dump the ball off short? Of course he does. So a rookie tight end could potentially see some fancy relevance there. But yeah, I think he's an interesting prospect who I imagine will be occupying a lot of taxi squads this year. And then, yeah, the only other one kind of really key for me there is, as Milroe said, if it was going to Vegas before Geno Smith, that would have been really exciting. With Geno there, it's a very different situation, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm a huge Harold Fanning fan. I'm a massive believer. For me, unfortunately, being sixth tight end off the board, back end of the third round, landing with the Saints, it just all felt a little bit unappealing, shall we say. But Ed, what about yourself? Any players picked, any particular picks that you felt were surprising, whether that be good, bad, or indifferent?
No, not especially. I think we all expect Travis Hunter to drop, don't we? And I think it's interesting to see kind of 3 out of the 4 first picks being running backs, especially after the last couple of years. We've not really had the running back talent that you maybe expected over previous years. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see, to see if that does come through in the actual draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was a perfect concoction of it. Is a good running back class. It is a bad wide receiver class, but this mock draft with the landing spot and draft capital for the wide receivers, it felt like it tanked it even further. I'd be shocked if, come to your rookie draft, there is only one wide receiver drafted in the top 8 picks. But we're only dealing with the cards that we are dealt as such. But guys, thank you ever so much for coming on. It is always so great to chop it up with you, and always really enjoy the conversations. Pestle, remind everybody watching and indeed listening, where can they find you guys, and where can they find the work?
So you can find us on X, and you can find us on Blue Sky, th_fancy_NFL. We've been on our end of season hiatus from putting shows out, but we are back next week with our free agency fallout. Wherever you get your podcasts, we'll hopefully be up in our game with a bit of YouTube content this off season as well. And then more importantly, our sign-ups for the TH Fantasy Football Best Ball Bonanza in Aid of Beast Memory Cafe are open. So if you find us over on X, find us over on Blue Sky, you can get yourself involved with that as well.
As I said, go and check out the guys' work. They're pumping out some fantastic stuff, and we're big fans here in the Sanctuary. If you are still here and you've not hit the subscribe button, what are you doing? Go ahead and do that. Rookie previews will start dropping in the next week or two. We're covering every single fantasy relevant player that you will need to know for your rookie drafts, so you will not want to miss it.